seems to me that there's quite a bit of crossover between personal and public in Mumbai. Things or experiences which might typically be thought of as being quite personal, like a private conversation, sometimes seem to be carried out in rather public settings, perhaps because of a lack of private space for many people living in Mumbai. We found from our in-depth interviews that we carried out as part of a study with Pukar, that many Mumbaikars who found that they didn't have much of their own space or private space at home were having their private conversations or their private moments with their friends or partners in some very public spaces, like at the beach or in the park, or going for a walk or going to the market, or these sorts of public settings. I'm based in Malawi, and this is where I carry out research into population fertility and family planning use. So that's my area of work. And if I have to try and think about the linkages between public and private and my work, I think the linkages that I would draw is with regards to decisions about childbearing and child rearing. Whereas the decision or the having of a child might be quite a private one made by a couple, in fact the costs of having that child are often borne more externally, more publicly. And I think there's a tension there, and I think that might be partly one of the reasons why we still see a persistently high fertility rate in much of sub-Saharan Africa. The sorts of things that spring to my mind are issues of the commons and use of public goods and services. So, for example, Lake Malawi provides fish for many families, many communities living on the lake, and with an increasing population, I guess there are sorts of questions of how is that fish stock managed. Who fishes it, how often, how is that resource managed, and what happens when the natural resources like fish are used up. So when I think about this sort of thing, I think about public and common resources like this and how they're managed and how they're valued. I think all I can say is that it certainly will change. We've just passed quite a remarkable historical moment where the world as a whole has just made the transition from being majority rural to majority urban. And that transition is especially going to take place for poorer countries sometime in the next 20, 30 years or so. And so, as someone who's interested in economic development, I think where we often think of poor countries as predominantly made up of rural villages, I think that world is slipping away into the past, and we somehow need to refresh our vision so that cities and towns more clearly come into the picture.